Hello and good afternoon. I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Maintaining Employee Well-Being During Periods of Uncertainty. Before we get into the main presentation, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, today's presentation is being recorded and everyone in attendance will receive a link to download the recording. You will also receive a link to download the slide deck, as well as the SHRM and HRCI continuing education credits. All of these materials will arrive in your email inboxes tomorrow afternoon, so please keep an eye out for that message. And if for whatever reason you do not receive that message, just please let us know and we will resend it. Today's session will last for approximately 45 minutes, and that includes an audience Q&A session at the end of the main presentation. So we highly encourage you to ask some questions throughout the presentation. Additionally, we also highly encourage you to share your personal experiences as we move along throughout the presentation. So to do so, you can type those comments and questions in using the GoToWebinar chat box that you should see on your screen. And if it's a question, we'll try to get to it at the very end. Additionally, myself, Lindsay, and Amanda are all remote. While we are not anticipating any issues, just please excuse any audio or visual hiccups that may occur. Again, we are not anticipating anything, but just want to let everyone know that little note. All right, so I just want to talk a little bit about Envoy. For nearly 20 years, Envoy has been on a mission to fix the inefficient, frustrating, and confusing immigration process. Envoy combines expert legal representation with innovative technology to deliver the only platform that makes it seamless for companies to hire, mobilize, and manage a global workforce. Envoy secures work authorization in over 150 countries, has grown 37% year over year, and works with over 1,000 customers. We are particularly proud of our NPS score, which is a testament to the employee experience that we provide. And joining us today are two panelists who I introduced a few seconds ago. But first, I'd like to properly introduce Lindsay Dagiantis, the Vice President of Human Resources here at Envoy Global. Lindsay is responsible for directing all aspects of the employee life cycle, and she is an experienced HR and recruiting professional with 15 years of recruiting and HR experience in fast-growing, highly competitive industries. And in her role at Envoy, Lindsay leverages data-backed decisions to attract, grow, and retain the best talent possible for the organization. And also joining us today is Amanda Bolhuis, a managing attorney from Global Immigration Associates. Amanda's practice focuses on employment-based, non-immigrant, and immigrant visa petitions. She has extensive experience handling B, E, H, L, O, and TN visa cases, employment-based green cards, and U.S. CIS requests for evidence and appeals. Amanda also has experience advising companies on corporate restructuring, mergers and acquisitions, and I-9 compliance issues. And Amanda works with clients in several industries, including automotive, insurance, and technology. Amanda and Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome. So before we get into the main presentation, I do have one final slide, housekeeping slide. Just a quick legal disclaimer that I am going to leave up for a few more seconds. And with that, let's get into it. So we're going to discuss the first section, the importance of employee experience today. And we have two stats that we want to share, and this is from a Willis Towers Watson COVID-19 Talent Impact Survey from April of 2020. This is linked when you receive the slide deck. And in that survey, 64% of employers said that they anticipate facing higher than normal levels of employee stress and anxiety over the next 2 to 6 months. Additionally, 60% expect that it will be harder to maintain employee resiliency over the next 6 months. So, first question, Lindsay, I'm curious to hear how you and your team have adjusted to this new reality that we're all in. So I'll start there, and then I have a follow-up question after.
Yeah, sure. So from an HR standpoint, we are balancing really kind of how to provide for our employees, but we're also personally adjusting. And part of that, really focuses on kind of going back to the basics, looking at keeping things structured, but also having flexibility. So going to a remote model has actually made us really think critically on what services are we providing and in what methods are we providing that, whether it's through technology, are there opportunities? So HR previously for us was maybe a little bit more reactive in certain areas, where now we've become more proactive. So that's how we've adjusted, and again, kind of keeping it focused on what can we do to ensure the security, health, safety, and productivity of our employees.
Definitely. So, and also, Lindsay, so I'm curious, going off of that, so that focusing on that first stat, that 64%, prior to COVID-19, how did HR help employees through levels of higher stress and anxiety?
Sure. So we look at this kind of one way is those levels of stress or factors that were impacting employees really kind of are on an individual basis. An individual scenario where it, in our world, it might be benefit coverage or illness, it might be the actual foreign national going through an immigration process, might be something personal. And there's different lengths of time in which this stress may impact an employee. The services that we were looking at is, from an HR standpoint, is continually reminding them of what is available in our benefits package, whether it's an employee assistance program, various leave regulations or laws, whether that's unpaid leave or protected leave like an FMLA, or just, hey, fun fact, we have telemedicine available. So there were kind of, again, individualized resource sharing. In this day and age, however, we're really needing to partner with our managers at a whole new level. Managers are becoming vital, not that they weren't before, but really vital in keeping HR and their teams kind of in pulse and in check. And it's no longer sufficient to say, hey, we've got an EAP that you can call. You're really having to take down the barriers of formality and just ask the question, how are you doing? And really listening. And so we're doing a lot of different things and just kind of honestly trial and error on what's going to fit best with our employees. Again, focusing on what is the best for safety, security, productivity, and health of our employee base.
Right. And Lindsay, I have a third question for you on this particular slide. Shifting to that 60% number. The phrase, what do we mean when we say employee resiliency?
Gosh, that's a good word. I think, if I'm going to do a definition, resiliency really is that ability to bounce back to a state or a version of normalcy. But because we're experiencing such a global kind of topic, stress, we haven't experienced this collectively at the same time in the same way. And there is a fatigue, both emotionally and physically. And so the resiliency is how can we support employees with information, with centralized communication, reliable, frequent content, so that there is kind of a structure and a state of normalcy that they can come back to. Again, managers are going to be a huge partner in this, but again, it's, staying the course, staying focused. Now on the flip side, HRs are really having to go and find a ton of information very quickly and make sure, okay, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? The answer is, best as an HR practitioner what's going to work for your employees, but there are tons of resources, whether it's SHRM, whether it's vendors, brokers, the current work or benefits package that you have. But I am constantly referencing a variety of tools to make sure that my employees feel that the information that they're getting is consistent, it's frequent enough, it's from reputable, sources, and it realistically meets the needs of their, of the foundations of their needs, so that they can be resilient.
Right. And speaking of the tools and resources, we're going to get into some of those specifics in a couple of minutes. But Lindsay, you brought up a great point and I think it's important that this presentation, it is, employee well-being is for companies as a whole, but in particular, and one group of employees that we want to talk about today are foreign national employees. They are experiencing increased uncertainty due to recent travel restrictions and changes in immigration policy. We've seen a lot of updates coming out from USCIS and the White House. So, Amanda, I'd like to ask you a question. Can you recap what some of these changes are and the effects that they've had since they've been implemented?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously there have been constant changes and updates, but some of the changes so far have included that we've seen, the most impact would be consulate closures and travel restrictions. And most of these are still in effect at this time. There's ongoing travel restrictions that do vary by country. So overall, we're still, when people are asking me, can I travel? I still tend to recommend not to travel outside of the U.S. at this time, if not absolutely necessary, just because of these, ongoing restrictions and the variants depending on the country. In addition, most consulates have been closed since about mid-March. Some consulates may be open for emergency appointments or, starting to reopen. We're seeing some people being able to get visa stamping appointments, but it really is specific to the consulate that they'll be attending. So again, I always advise that the individual reach out to the consulate directly to obtain the most up-to-date information on their procedures and processing information, because what's reflected online might not always be the case. Another update was the president issued a proclamation that was effective April 23, which temporarily suspended immigrant visa processing for certain applicants outside the U.S. For 60 days. So this announcement, it didn't affect any non-immigrant visa categories, so anybody on an H-1B, TNL, any of those visa applicants, and it didn't apply to any immigrant visa processing for individuals who are already inside the U.S. and applying for adjustment of status. So this proclamation, it essentially didn't change much, since most of the consulates, as we discussed, were already closed for visa processing, but it did definitely lead to a large amount of questions and definitely uncertainty. And in this uncertain time, it just kind of added to that stress level. Additionally, because of the closures at the consulates, people haven't been able to travel abroad and apply for their visa renewals. So this could affect maybe like blanket petitions, TN applicants in Mexico, certain things. So more people are actually applying for their extensions of stay within the U.S., which is a different route that they can proceed. But another caveat to that is USCIS has temporarily suspended premium processing for the I-129 and the I-140 petitions. So it does result in longer processing times. That's something that I personally would expect would resume once things get back to normal, but USCIS tends to suspend premium processing, especially in this situation. So we'll be able to provide an update from that as soon as USCIS provides one. And lastly, the USCIS had canceled in-person appointments. So, for example, biometrics and green card interviews were canceled during this time. We expect these to be rescheduled when the offices reopen, and USCIS has, in fact, indicated that they're preparing to reopen their offices either on or after June 4. So at this time, there is an end in sight. Hopefully that June 4 date is something that can be attained, and then things can start kind of processing per usual. But until then, what we're doing is just kind of keeping an eye on any new processes or any new updates, and then advising at that time.
Right. Great. Thank you so much for kind of recapping some of the changes and updates that have been released. Obviously, a lot. So, Lindsay, I'm curious to hear the HR side of this. So, when something like Amanda just mentioned, like travel restrictions. So when something like a travel restriction goes into effect, what might the response be from HR?
Sure. So I think when these things come out is I need to ensure, number one, to my employees that your safety and security is utmost to us, that we're going to move urgently to find out what needs to be done and to resolve this. And it's really about what information do I need to disseminate to my employees and which employees. How do I get this information to them, the mechanism of communication, and really making sure that this information is reliable and true, meaning just as that, like there's a lot of speculation on, when things may come out and what does it mean, and it goes crazy. And I think it's really, really important for HR right now to like kind of be that calm, cool, collected, patient in the department to say we need to be there's so many moving pieces, and then finally really looking at what else can I do to ensure that my team and individuals and foreign nationals feel that they are supported, informed, and productive, because that additional distraction, that additional stress really impacts many things. But like, you're there for the talent. You acquired this talent because it's going to make your teams better and kind of have that impact overall. It's your duty and responsibility to keep your teams informed. It's also your duty and responsibility to say there's a lot of information coming out. We're going to work with experts in this area so that it's not just the HR team or the leadership team just making a decision, really kind of supporting it with the data and the facts through a variety of sources, again, to make sure that your employees feel that the information they're getting is consistent, true, reliable.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to lead perfectly into this next topic of discussion. Lindsay, what would you say is the role of human resources teams, especially today when there is so much uncertainty?
Yeah, and this is, I think I go to like, what should HR do, and then what's real for HR to do. A critical role for HR right now is to provide that consistent, frequent communication to employees. You really have to kind of put on your marketer hat. Anybody listening who's an HR practitioner understands that you wear a lot of different hats, and they rotate daily. And it's really, really important to understand how to disseminate this information to your teams. It's also important that HRs not be stagnant or too over reliant on what I'll say the previous processes or methods of communication if they just aren't going to work in the new environment. So if previously you were a very face-to-face organization and everybody knew to get all their information physically in a centralized location, that may no longer be feasible. So embracing and changing maybe the method or the timeliness on how people are receiving it. If it's, email is there, but it's not the best right now, is there another way? So that's one thing. HR also has to manage a huge influx of information to keep up with these compliance, these guides, these new laws. Another big part of HR is the kind of legal responsibilities that we have in a lot of different ways. And now it's kind of the conflux of, you've got medical information potentially, which is, HIPAA, you've got OSHA responsibilities, you've got immigration responsibilities, you've got compliance, you've got potentially, furlough or layoff situations. So they're all kind of converging in one area. That, and all at once with all of your employees. It's really important that you partner with your internal stakeholders, your managers, your leadership teams, and anybody that you can. I'm very good friends right now with a lot of my external resources, just because we do have to champion the health and safety of our employees first and foremost. So that's the new role of HR. It's a little bit overwhelming, but now that we kind of have a process in place, the process is from a lot of different resources, continue to keep updated with information, disseminate it, in a consistent manner, and really just kind of have that human element, like bring that human and that people part back to the HR role.
For sure. And so I guess it's going to lead to my question to Amanda. So Amanda, we've been discussing, a lot of how to ensure the information is shared. So I'm curious from, I guess, the attorney perspective, what types of proactive steps have you taken to ensure that the foreign nationals that you help are best informed?
Yeah, so I think it's important here not only to provide the best and updated advice to the foreign nationals, but also just be that partner. Work with the companies, work with the employees, just very closely, because there's a lot of information coming out, not only just for immigration, but for, across the board. But there's a lot of information coming out from a lot of different sources. You have people speculating on blogs, you have, a tweet that results in a presidential proclamation. So things that are very uncertain and can cause a wide variety of just, almost panic and fear. So on our end, and from what I try to do, is just really be that sounding board. You need advice. How can I help you? This is what's going on. As soon as new information is released, and we provide that information, I provide guidance. I reach out to individuals who may be impacted, and we definitely receive a lot of questions from foreign national employees regarding uncertainties, and just try and provide that reassurance and guidance. For example, will this impact my green card? No, don't worry. Your green card is inside the U.S. It'll be fine. We'll be able to continue. Things like that, just providing that reassurance in such an uncertain time. And then if an employee will be impacted, what I do is, and what our firm does is make sure that not only they're aware of the best plan moving forward, point out any potential hurdles, and then work with the company too to kind of just work forward on this case and provide as much transparency as possible, because I find that that's very helpful. Like if a case is going to be impacted, okay, what's the plan moving forward? Figure it out, figure out how best to proceed, and what are the potential roadblocks, what could potentially come up, and that way everybody has a good overall view and at least a solid jumping off point. I think transparency and just how to proceed is one of the best things that attorneys can do to help the foreign national employees.
Gotcha. Great. Thank you for sharing. And that's actually a perfect segue into the next section, like 5 steps to protect employee well-being in uncertain situations. So we're first going to discuss protect physical and emotional health. So obviously, Lindsay, and we discussed it a little bit earlier, but now more than ever, it's important to protect physical and emotional health of employees. So I'm curious, what role does a company play in caring for local and international employees?
Yeah, so there's a lot. And I think if you're running an organization that has, global employees or global locations, it's really important that you know what the state and local laws are out there. Number one. Number two, what's available because of the pandemic, what may be available for these employees. It's not your job to interpret it, it's your job to find, who knows more. So that's part one. But it really comes back to protect the team and protect your employees. It's going to be interesting in however many months or year or something, the pivot of what health and wellness means from an employee engagement and really, quite frankly, like a responsibility. And it's going to look different both in practice, but also in policies. So it's, number one, ensuring it might be things of travel, things like that. It could be travel, it could be whether it's medical or travel insurance, taking measures to prevent, ill employees from visiting other office locations. You may want to consider what information are you getting to determine whether or not this employee should travel or not. And then, making sure that obviously you're consistent with immigration regulations around that. But it is, I think it's funny, I have an article pulled up right now from SHRM that was published yesterday about employees' mental well-being and what HRs can do. And those types of pieces of information that are really critical to stay up to date with, but also continue to have those partners in those locations and be able to make the decisions on what's best for the employees overall.
And so, Lindsay, next question I have for you on this, as we move on to the next slide. A couple of minutes ago, you mentioned that managers have always been important, but they're even more important now. So I'm curious, what roles do managers and directors play in protecting employees' physical and mental health?
Yeah, so I think as a manager, whether you've been in a management position for years, or if this is your first run, and as HR practitioners, we've got both. It's important that HR take the stance of, your role as a manager is changing, number one. It is essential that you embrace this ambiguity, but your team is going to be very aware and kind of sensitive to your actions. So kind of magnifying the activity. So one way, again, to really do this is staying focused, staying consistent, and really asking very consistently, what can I do to help? What can I do to remove distractions? The more that our managers can really put out there as we're in this transition period, we'll call it, we need to really understand what these distractions are for employees. Even if they say nothing, all is fine, the more you can support your employees, the better. And then the other thing is, when partnering with HR, it's really essential to say, if a manager came to me and said, Lindsay, what am I not thinking about when it comes to providing support or communication from my employees? I'm doing this, but I'm not getting through to them. They may not be fully aware of circumstances that are impacting their teams, or and while HR does need to obtain, or have a level of confidentiality, it is those things of what's their living environment. We are physically going to see inside their homes, and so what, in some circumstances, if you're in a remote kind of workforce, and managers can really provide structure, consistency, and flexibility. And as they learn more about their direct reports, they can, again, partner with HR to say, what, I've got an employee that's struggling here. What can I do? And I think it's just putting a little bit of grace out there, but also being consistent on what those expectations are, as we are in this transition period.
Mm-hmm. So Lindsay, I'm curious. So you mentioned like that consistency and structure. So what does your day and week look like with your direct reports?
Sure. So very early in moving to a remote work environment, I said that a daily stand-up for us was critical. Knowing my team and how they operate, and the pace at which information was coming to us, and that was super important. So we have a 15-minute stand-up every morning. There is no agenda. Sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's very business focused, and I very quickly was able to kind of get a sense on my team. If there's video involved, you definitely have to be on video. It's just that social interaction, and some days we don't have much to say because we've kind of accomplished it all, or we've got trackers in place on what we need to be. I also have weekly one-on-ones with my team, or with my direct reports, and then I also have a weekly one-on-one with our CEO to keep him updated. Now, of course, I can always communicate more frequently as needed, but keeping that consistent interaction is really crucial for HRs right now. And I've had to have some honest conversations, and I say honest in the nicest way, to say, you're not having a good day, or hey, you've been doing really well and you are taking this like a champ. And I've had honest conversations with my team as well. Transitioning home and having no childcare is a real stressor for many people, not just HRs, but all of your employees. And there's been some good days and some bad days. And we all say that, but the more and more we can communicate that and to our employees, but also keeping the bar high, is going to be the best way that companies and HRs can support all of their employees, managers, as well as the front line.
Those are some good tips. Thank you for sharing those, Lindsay. And Amanda, briefly, you also, as a managing attorney, you oversee a team of attorneys as well as legal support staff. So I'm curious, can you share how you're helping your fellow attorneys and support staff and those individuals you manage?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of like Lindsay, we're keeping consistent team meetings and one-on-ones, because I think it's really important to maintain the open line of communication. Now that we're all working remote, it can definitely seem a little lonely when you're just working in front of some computer screens, but being able to constantly connect, do, the team video chats, And a lot of times too, what I'll try to do is pick up the phone and call someone or do a video chat instead of just doing the instant message online, because at this time it is very easy just to reach out and IM somebody a question. But it's actually been pretty nice to give somebody a phone call or do that video chat just for a little bit more of a personal connection. And something else that our team has been doing semi-regularly is we try, well, I have everybody participate in kind of team building activities. So about once a week, we'll try and do like a virtual coffee hour, where it's not necessarily just all about business, but again, kind of how are you doing? How is everybody holding up? Tell me something good that happened in your day, things like that, focusing on the positive. We can do online games. There's a lot of avenues for that. We actually just recently did a virtual talent show, which was pretty interesting.
That sounds like a lot of fun. Did you discover any hidden talents?
Yeah, my team is very talented. I actually borrowed the idea from my sister-in-law. Her company did it, and I thought, you know what, that just sounds kind of fun, something silly. But yeah, there's a banjo player on my team. There was a mommy-daughter dance. It was pretty cool.
It's really, really, really great to hear. And I think it's like you mentioned, these coffee hours can be a big boost throughout the day and throughout the week. And Lindsay and Amanda, you both mentioned, the importance of communication. And we actually got a couple of questions on just like how we are communicating, what tools we're using. So I'm gonna leave the floor open for Lindsay. I'll address the question to you first. As we're all working from home, what tools are you using to help communicate with your reports and employees as a whole?
Sure. So we are at Envoy, we are on a Microsoft environment. So the suite of tools with Microsoft Teams has been extremely helpful, and still learning, various aspects of that. I think that is number one, as Mando was saying, it's picking up the phone, whether it's a cell phone or an online call, but, actually talking to someone has been super helpful beyond, a chat. I would say that, there are really, online communication platforms are really having their moment. And as HRs, you have the opportunity to hear like what's working for the group. You become very super aware very quickly on what methods of communication work best for your teams, because they no longer can do a drive-by and say, hey, I have a quick question. And so you become actually very aware of where can I gather this information. So that's been kind of exciting, I guess, for us. But we're still kind of figuring out what it is, but our current setup has fared well for our team.
For sure. And as we're on the topic of physical and emotional health and communication, there is one aspect, Lindsay, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on regarding over communication. As you mentioned, we're all remote. There are so many tools that we're using to communicate with each other, whether it's via your desktop or a tablet or your phone. And I've personally seen a couple more articles come out regarding like employees and individuals tiring out from constant Zoom calls and et cetera. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on when might over communicating become an issue and how could we balance that out?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I did give this thought beforehand, but when will we hit the point of over communication about this topic? I think it's dependent on each organization, each industry. There are going to be industries that are, primarily, information is critical for the literal safety of its employees. Obviously, healthcare is a huge part of that. I think when it comes to over communication, you will recognize very quickly on what's resonating and what's appropriate. If it's just another status update of like, here's what we know so far. It's also kind of following, what is the government doing? And I say that, what's your local government, what's your state government, what's the federal government, what is the frequency of information that they're communicating, and is there anything new that's going to help protect, your employee base? I think each company will also determine what's relative to their organization. So again, healthcare may continue to have these going on, but other groups may not, or it's going to change. So I think when it comes to over communication, it's consistency, dial back the frequency, and solidify where they're getting the information, whether it's, again, email. Having multiple mediums can be that over communication. If you're getting a text and an email and a chat and a video, that's hard. So it's okay to turn off the video every once in a while. It's okay to listen. I think that's, going to be one thing, and not to draw hard lines in the sand at this point as HR, to be really, really flexible, but also confident that where and what you're communicating is really important for the safety of your teams.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So moving on to the next step on the topic of communication, communicate frequently, like we've mentioned, Lindsay and Amanda. But on this particular slide, Lindsay, it's a tough topic. We're seeing some companies perhaps furloughing or laying off employees. How might HR teams navigate these tough situations and share this type of information?
Sorry. So I think that if a company has the decision to do a layoff, and for those on the call, if you're part of that decision making or part of that execution of doing a layoff or furlough, it's really important to understand who's the recipient of it, in what medium, and be really, really buttoned up. I can't stress that enough. This is not something to be taken lightly. It needs to, and whether that's an internal communications team that you have, or internal Marcom team, or from leadership directly, it really has to be sensitive to that person's experience. Number one, it's also taking into consideration any kind of locale or situation. So if you, in this scenario, when we're talking about foreign nationals, like what additional information does your foreign national need to have? And as Amanda kind of alluded to earlier, there's a whole lot of process. So you will need to involve, immigration attorneys. You may need to involve benefits counselors. You may need to involve other resources to ensure that you're being compliant in the manner, and be really prepared, and then centralize that in, again, wherever makes sense for your business. It's a really hard scenario for any company and for any business to be in, but there may be opportunities for a hotline or a central point of contact, and even just a centralized email, but there needs to be that workflow consistently in those decisions.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And Lindsay, those are all great points, and I want to ask you a quick question on that. But before I get there, I do want to be mindful of the time. We are going to go a couple minutes over. Just want, if any of our attendees do need to hop off to take care of other matters, just please remember that there will be a recording made available, and everyone will receive the recording. So with that, so Lindsay and Amanda, how can companies, do you think companies should make perhaps some leaders available to answer questions from foreign nationals, given this type of period of uncertainty?
Um, yes, I think that needs to be determined by your company. I think that is an option. It's a great experience for your employee, and there's also some, duty of care for your employees. I mean, you're changing someone's life, so I think there is, a great opportunity to direct foreign nationals to the appropriate source or individual to specifically address those concerns.
Gotcha. So next, next step is to leverage technology effectively. And I think we're all in agreement, Lindsay and Amanda, that the tools that we're using have helped a lot as we're working from home. And Amanda, for instance, you're typically in the online Envoy platform, which is online. So I imagine your workflow hasn't changed too much. But considering immigration, are there parts of your job that have changed, and can you discuss those changes? And how certain processes in immigration have also changed, and how might HR adapt?
Yeah, so for the most part, since we are typically working through the Envoy platform, a lot of it hasn't changed. A lot of my day today is still very similar to what I was doing in office. But there are definitely a few items that were done physically in the office, like our support staff with processing the mail, printing, and then physically signing and sending cases. So luckily, we've been able to transition relatively smoothly to almost a fully remote office with minimal impact, which I think is, I personally definitely appreciate, because again, my day-to-day hasn't been impacted too much. But I know that this is something, a lot of our clients are facing as well, dealing with things with the printing, like no or very slow printers, or, no scanners, or having to use their camera to scan things. And even the ability to send things out via FedEx and UPS. I know my data copy clerks on my team, they're actually still going to FedEx or UPS or scheduling pickups at their home. So that's definitely something that's changed. And even the inability to check mail on a regular basis for notices. I know that a lot of my clients are maybe going into the office once a week or getting things forwarded. That's been a big change. So with all of this considered, fortunately, the immigration process has evolved in a few areas to help ease the burden of these stay-at-home orders. For example, USCIS announced flexibility in accepting copies of signatures at this time for cases rather than requiring the original wet ink signature. That's been a huge help, because that eliminates one step of having to get the wet ink signature, send it to our office, or send it to somebody's home and then send it. It just eliminates a lot of the back and forth. And it also allows me to be able to, do my signature online. I don't have to send anything anywhere. So that's something that, I'm hoping will be here to stay, because it actually is a little bit easier than it previously was. But I'm sure USCIS will provide us with updates. But another thing that was helpful was the Department of Labor, instead of issuing the physical blue copies of the certified perms, they started issuing certified perms via email. So that was definitely very helpful as well. We get that email, we can continue with the I-140 process in a timely manner. So there are definitely, updates that we're working with. But I'm finding that overall, a key way to adapt to these changes and to this new landscape is just mainly to keep that constant communication line open. We have constant communication with cases and questions. And I think that at this time, everybody kind of understands that everything's taking a little bit longer. The mail notifications, it might take 2 weeks to receive an approval notice, and that's honestly, sometimes it just takes us that long regardless, but then the processing or with receipt notices to the employer, things like that, it can take a long time because that's just how it is. Case processing, there's no premium processing right now for I-129s, I-140s, so things processing with USCIS will take longer. But as long as everybody's on the same page and able to receive like the timely updates in just, in the know, I think this helps to avoid a lot of confusion and frustration, just keeping that communication line open.
Definitely. And that's going to bring us to our final step in this particular section, boost motivation and engagement. So, Lindsay, what are some ways that HR can go about boosting employee motivation and engagement?
I think this is, again, partnership with your managers and saying it's on you to, continue to engage and empower your employees. My comment to anyone in HR right now is it's a moment to shine with your employees and your managers and your leadership in really refining and staying really focused on what's going to make a difference in your employees' lives. The way to do this, again, transparency, consistency, and frequency of communication, the technologies that are being used. It's shout outs, it's the recognition of what we're all going through, being specific and meaningful, both at the leadership level or at the managerial level. It's cross-team acknowledgement. It's also ensuring that there's a goal, right? So a lot of businesses have, kind of put certain things on hold and, taken up new things. And for HR, it's really to empower your employees to set those maybe shorter term goals, and saying like, what can I do this week to make an impact? What's going to be that success where I find meaning? So we're really having to shift our kind of mentality, and again, blurring the lines even further between kind of that work life and that home life is going to be okay right now. I think that's really going to keep employees confident that your company is the best place that they can work right now. Keeping them confident. Again, you're trying to retain your talent. That's the other thing. You're trying to retain your talent, keep them productive, and ensuring that we're meeting their needs. So it's that dissemination of information in a consistent manner is going to be essential. And as HR, you're in the background finding what is going to make the most sense for your team. There is not going to be a checklist that wins all checklists. There's not going to be a one thing that is going to work better than the next. You as the HR are going to make it that best. But again, drive that purpose home with your teams and your employees to say what can you do today to make that difference. So it's a little bit of a soapbox moment for HRs right now, but I think we're it's exciting too on what innovation and what really important things come out of this.
Definitely. And Amanda, just a quick question. Have you and your team, and I guess at GIA, have you implemented any ways to boost motivation engagement, such as like employee shout outs and whatnot?
Yeah, I think that's something that comes up quite often. Not only just trying to provide that added support, like if somebody prepares a case or, just again, recognizing when people do a good job. I think that's really important now more than ever, just trying to give that little bit additional support, recognition, keep in contact with people, and not just for business purposes, but some days I just, send somebody a text or an IM or give them a call and say, how are you doing today? how's everything
Mm-hmm.
going? But it's definitely a focus too within, leadership in our firm to try and make sure that everybody is doing it at least as well as they can be, and how can we do to support them in that? Like what can we do to accomplish everybody's continued well-being in again, things like just, the coffee meetings or one-on-ones or game nights, trivia nights, things like that, just to give everybody kind of a sense of community and continue that purpose. Obviously, we do need to get work done, but we want to be together work together as a team and just kind of help each other out.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I would also add real quick to that, it's also what you're not doing. And it's really important for HRs to stress with managers right now is that productivity is going to look different, and it's going to look different for a little bit. And as managers and as HR, we need to make sure that what we're asking of our employees is really focused on the key drivers and not, the nuanced kind of punitive measures around productivity. People are in scenarios that they've never been in before, that they realistically should not be in, and putting punitive measures on employees it's going to do the opposite. Now, and again, productivity is one thing, but really just having that empathy for your team is going to go a long way.
Great. Awesome. So Lindsay and Amanda, thank you so much. As we wrap things up today, I know we are a couple minutes over. Thank you so much for the great discussion today. I think it's very beneficial to have this type of discussion. So time permitting, we did get a couple questions coming in for any of our attendees. If you do have a question, please feel free to type it in. We'll try to address it. As a reminder, everyone in attendance will receive the recording, the slide deck, and the continuing education credits. So Lindsay, one question that came in at the beginning was, how are you handling the recording of working hours for hourly employees?
Yeah, and I'm thinking about this one, and I'm wanting to make sure I'm fully understanding the question. Non-exempt employees, so hourly employees, should already have a mechanism in which they can track their hours worked, and it's required that, and I'm not an employment attorney, so I'll be careful. It's really essential that there is already a process in place or a mechanism to track these hours. And it's a great opportunity to also remind employees that it is their responsibility to track any and all time that they are working, if they are hourly employees. Now, if there's a technology component that's missing, maybe there's an opportunity to put that technology in place. So hopefully I'm not missing anything in that question, but that's how I would address it.
I think that's a great answer. Okay, I think we're going to end things there. We are at the top of the hour at 2 o'clock Central Time. So with that, to all of our attendees, thank you so much for joining us today. Lindsay and Amanda, thank you so much for joining us as well, and for the great discussion that we just had. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.